Hey, welcome back to Reading the Bible Together. Pastor Matt alongside Eric Farrell as we continue in Paul's letter to the Galatians, coming today to chapter 2. Eric, I'll let you take it away.
Before I read,
what do you got?
You're so much taller than me. This is our fourth video we're recording together, and
sorry.
I'd like to
Right.
have a booster.
Well, just
sorts.
lean forward.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's like how you make the fish appear bigger in the frame.
Nobody wants to see me bigger than I already am. Okay, here we go. Galatians chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. 14 years later, I went up again to Jerusalem, this time with Barnabas. I took Titus along also. I went in response to a revelation that set before them the gospel that I preach among the Gentiles. But I did this privately to those who seemed to be leaders, for fear that I was running or had run my race in vain. Yet not even Titus, who was with me, was compelled to be circumcised, even though he was Greek. This matter arose because some false brothers had infiltrated our ranks to spy on the freedom we have in Christ Jesus to make us slaves. We did not give in to them for a moment so that the truth of the gospel might remain with you. As for those who seemed to be important, whatever they were makes no difference to me. God does not judge by external appearances. Those men added nothing to my message. On the contrary, they saw that I had been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the Gentiles, just as Peter had been to the Jews. For God, who was at work in the ministry of Peter as an apostle to the Jews, was also at work in my ministry as an apostle to the Gentiles. James, Peter, and John, those reputed to be pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship when they recognized the grace given to me. They agreed that we should go to the Gentiles, that they to the Jews. All they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor, the very thing I was eager to do.
But when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For certain men came from James, and he was eating with the Gentiles, but when they came, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the Jewish party. And the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically among them, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. But when I saw that their conduct was not in step with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas before them all, if you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you force the Gentiles to live like Jews? We ourselves are Jews by birth and not Gentile sinners, and yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. So we also have believed in Christ Jesus in order to be justified by faith in Christ and not by works of the law, because by works of the law no one will be justified. But if in our endeavor to be justified in Christ, we too were found to be sinners, is Christ then a servant of sin? Certainly not. For if I rebuild what I tore down, I prove myself to be a transgressor. For through the law I died to the law, so that I might live to God. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not nullify the grace of God, for if righteousness were through the law, then Christ died for no purpose. All right. Peace and battle between the apostles in chapter 2. What's going on in the text to you, Eric?
Well, what happens here, and this will also continue into chapter 3, is this conversation about the law.
Yeah.
And when you've got the gospel being preached and it's being communicated to people that have just been, we're all about the law. This is our identity, and this is how we're known by God. We're circumcised. We're these other things, right? These are physical, outward, things, and these rituals and these processes, these traditions, all these different things. That's how they identified as followers of Jesus. And I know it's not in this text. It happens to be in Colossians. I want to say chapter 2, where Paul is speaking again, and he's talking about that the circumcision is not done by the hands of men, but it's done by Christ. Yeah. And this switch that's getting flipped, where where Paul begins to explain that baptism, that's what marks you as a believer now, right? And so when I read this and when I think about the law, the other thing that pops into my mind is what Jesus himself says, which says, he communicates, says, I did not come to abolish the law, right? So it's not that the law doesn't have a significance or importance. We need the law, right? But the law is not what saves us. And what the reason we're saved by Jesus is not because he abolished it and rendered it, useless, but because he fulfilled it, right? He fulfilled the law. To brought it to its fruition so that we might have life in him. And to me, through these two chapters, that's really this dichotomy, if that's the right word, I'm not sure, that exists between acknowledging the law is a thing, was a thing, but it has a different significance today. But it's not void.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the key.
No, I like that. What sticks out to me, kind of the continuation of that at the very end, it's a verse I've had memorized for a long time. I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. That just everything about this continued existence is grace. It's all given to me by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. And this is where we think about, like, the works that we do don't save us, but he wants us to be doing the works as a continuation of this faith, as evidence of our faith, as an outpouring, as a response to what Jesus has done for us. And so that's what sticks out to me. What's this chapter do for your faith? How does it strengthen your faith, Eric?
Honestly, when I look at in the beginning part of it specifically, I would say verses 3 and 4. And I don't know if I'm reading this properly or not, but he says, yet not even Titus, who was with me, was compelled to be circumcised, even though he was a Greek. This matter arose some false brothers, infiltrating our ranks, to spy on us the freedom we have in Christ Jesus to make us slaves. There's a freedom we have in Jesus that if we allow the law to prevent us from seeing that, we're still slaves. That's what I'm reading. That's the way I'm seeing that. And I'm not sure if that's 100% right or not, but that's the way that I'm looking at that myself. And so when I think about the way I can treat the law, where I'm very rigid, right? When I am, because not if, it's when I'm real rigid about it, it's not good for those people around me, number one, and it's also not good for me.
Right.
I am robbing myself and others around me of the freedom that's found in Christ apart from the law. And so that's what it's doing for me. And I know perspective is a big thing for me, and I said it a few chapters ago, but that really does help for good perspective for me.
For sure. I think as I'm looking at it, with the disagreements between Paul and Peter, right? Two of the big guys in the faith, right? Like, we don't have Christianity in 2026 if we don't have Paul and Peter, in many ways. If we don't have that proclamation of the faith, and that they were so disagreeable on some of these issues, and yet found agreement in Christ, right? Like, they didn't allow even these foundational big disagreements to divide them. I think in my own faith, it causes me to reflect on, like, what am I allowing in my own thoughts or in my own beliefs about doctrine and the word? What am I allowing to divide me from others? And should those things be dividing me? Like, yes, they come to an agreement. They get down to an agreement on going to the Jews and going to the Gentiles and remembering the poor. But their agreement is it gets narrow in what they agree to, so that they can think more broadly about sharing the gospel. And I think, okay, well, are we thinking so broadly about what we need to agree on that we can never get to unity? And just thinking about all the different denominations and all the different ways that people are expressing their faith in Jesus Christ today. It gets me to start thinking about those things. And and we talked a bit before about how, like, we're both prickly, like we can have those prickly personalities. Like, I want to be less prickly when I'm talking about the gospel with other Christians. Like, for those, yes, I'm very concerned with those outside the church. But, like, what about those inside the church? Am I as concerned with them or am I more like standoffish and
Sure.
and argumentative with those who are inside? So just thinking about that, thinking about unity, thinking about how that expresses itself. But what are you going to do today, having read Galatians chapter 2?
Well, quite a bit different from what we were just expanding upon, I would say, but maybe not. But that's the way I see it is in verse 6. God does not judge by external appearance. It's quite simple for me. For today, when I think about what it means to live as a believer, to love people well around me and those in the distance, it's not being judgmental. That's really it. I think that is a constant battle. I know I'm a hypocrite, 100%. That's not, I don't ever wonder, I don't wake up going, oh, am I being hypocritical today? The answer is yes. But it's a little easier for me to accept that for some reason than being judgmental. I tend to maybe think I'm not, and the reality is I am. And that's usually based off observations. And I don't want to look at people in a judgmental way. And it's not my MO, but it is a thing.
Sure.
And so for to me today, it's to be reminded that, my gosh, if Jesus judged me based off of what I do and how I look, I'm not going to be on the other side with him.
Yeah.
And I don't want that for people around me. And it's not good for my heart and my own mind to look towards others in any sort of a judgmental way.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna kind of live in an echo of that. How can I be confessional in conversation instead of accusational? I think that's what I'm going to wrestle with today.
Write that down.
How can I be kind of authentic the way that Paul has been in his letters so far? Like he's sharing the real parts of himself. It's no longer I who lives, but Christ who lives in me, because I have been crucified with Christ. And so I want to live from that deep kind of humility instead of being like, hey, here's what's wrong with your life. Here's how you need to change. I want to be like, no, here's how I need to change and how God is still in the process of doing that, even right now, even as a pastor, even as a church worker, even as somebody who's in this pretty regularly. God is still working on Paul and on Peter and on Eric and on Matt. And so that's kind of my hope for me today. But what about you? We're reading Galatians chapter 2, and there's a lot going on in this text, and maybe you've got a question. So you can drop those in the comments, and we'll read the Bible together, and we'll answer those questions together. But thanks so much, Eric. Appreciate it.